You know that moment when you're standing at the edge of a decision, heart pounding, mind racing, and instead of stepping forward, you freeze. Maybe it was a job offer that felt risky but exciting. Maybe it was the woman you wanted to ask out but never did. Maybe it was a business idea you sketched out on paper but left sitting in your drawer because you convinced yourself it wasn't the right time. We've all been there, caught in the thick fog of hesitation. It feels safe in the moment, like pressing pause protects us from failure. But in reality, that pause has a cost. The Stoics knew this well. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Yet most of us live as though tomorrow is guaranteed, as though delay is harmless. And that quiet little habit of doubting and waiting, that hesitation, is destroying more lives than failure ever could. I once met a man in New York who carried this truth in the lines of his face. He had spent years dreaming of starting his own restaurant, but always told himself the timing wasn't right. "After I save more money," he'd say, "after I feel ready." By the time he finally tried, the opportunity had slipped away. Rent was higher, competitors had taken the market, and his energy was drained. What haunted him wasn't failure, it was the years wasted in doubt. He told me, "I didn't lose to other people, I lost to myself." That's the true cost of hesitation, the invisible theft of your own potential. But what does Stoic philosophy teach us about this? At its core, Stoicism is not about cold indifference. It's about clarity. It tells us to separate what is in our control from what is not, and to act decisively where our will matters. Doubt thrives in the opposite space. It keeps us circling the things we cannot control while paralyzing us from touching the things we can. When Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do," he was drawing a line in the sand. Decide who you are, and then move. Hesitation is the refusal to move. Think about it. How many times have you stood still, convincing yourself you were being cautious, when really you were just afraid? What if the real danger was never failing, but letting life pass by untouched? The modern world only makes hesitation louder. You open social media and see 1,000 different paths, each one promising success. Should you build an online business? Should you invest? Should you move cities? We drown in options, and with every choice comes the possibility of regret. This abundance paralyzes us. We stand in front of endless doors and never walk through any. The Stoics would call this madness. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Hesitation is waste in its purest form, because while you hesitate, time does not. The clock is always moving, whether you move or not. I knew a young man from Texas who wanted to join the military. For years, he told himself he would do it, but fear of leaving comfort, of leaving friends, kept him frozen. By the time he finally applied, his health disqualified him. The regret hit him harder than any rejection letter, because he realized that the chance had been his, and he had surrendered it, not to fate, not to an enemy, but to hesitation. This is why Stoicism speaks so urgently about action. You don't control tomorrow, but you do control today. Every delay is an agreement with weakness. Imagine your future self 10 years from now. Will he thank you for your careful hesitation, or curse you for the chances you never took? The human brain tricks us with doubt. It whispers that if we just wait a little longer, conditions will be perfect, that once we feel ready, we'll act. But here's the truth. Readiness is a myth. The Stoics didn't wait for courage to show up. They practiced it daily, like a muscle. Marcus Aurelius didn't write about waiting until he felt brave. He wrote about doing what reason and duty demanded, even when fear stood in the way. Modern psychology backs this up. Action creates clarity, not the other way around. The people you admire, the ones who seem fearless, aren't free of doubt. They've simply learned not to obey it. Take the example of a tech entrepreneur I once interviewed. He admitted he had no idea what he was doing when he launched his first startup. He doubted himself every single day, but he also knew that inaction was worse than failure. He failed 3 times before he finally built a successful company, but he told me something unforgettable. Doubt never left me. I just stopped letting it vote. That line could have been lifted straight from Epictetus himself. What would your life look like if doubt had no vote in your decisions? If every choice came down only to reason, not fear? When you hesitate, you feed a shadow that grows stronger each time you give in. It's like standing in quicksand. The longer you wait, the deeper you sink, until movement feels impossible. And yet action, any action, has the power to break the spell. Seneca once said, "While we are postponing, life speeds by." That's not poetry, it's a warning. The danger of hesitation is not that you'll miss one opportunity, but that you'll form a habit of missing all of them. Doubt becomes a lifestyle. You tell yourself you're being wise, when in fact you're building a cage. One of the most common regrets of the dying, recorded by hospice nurses across America, is this: "I wish I had lived true to myself, not what others expected of me." What is that, if not the voice of hesitation echoing at the end of life? These people weren't destroyed by bad choices, but by the absence of choices. The Stoics remind us daily of death not to depress us, but to jolt us awake. Memento mori, remember you must die. To live with hesitation is to waste that reminder. Picture yourself on your deathbed. Will you be comforted by the risks you never took, or haunted by the silence of a life unlived? There's a dangerous comfort in hesitation that many of us don't recognize until it's too late. It disguises itself as safety, as caution, as wisdom. It whispers that staying still protects you from loss. But think about it. When has inaction ever protected anyone? You might avoid one kind of pain, but you invite another, deeper kind, the pain of regret. The Stoics were relentless about this truth. They argued that nature designed us for motion, for participation in life. Marcus Aurelius compared hesitation to being tangled in your own thoughts, while life drags you forward regardless. "Do not act as if you had 10,000 years to throw away," he wrote. Yet that's exactly what hesitation makes us do, live as if we're immortal. I remember a conversation with an older man at a coffee shop in Chicago. He was in his 60s, gray hair, tired eyes, and he told me he once loved painting. He had dreamed of being an artist, but he never pursued it seriously. Why? Because he doubted his talent. He told himself he would try after retirement, once he had financial stability, but decades passed. When I met him, his hands shook too much to paint steady lines. He looked at me and said something that still echoes. "I waited so long to begin that I lost the ability to begin." Doubt had stolen more than his art. It had stolen the very years he thought he was saving. Isn't it strange? We fear failure, yet the real tragedy is never daring enough to fail at all. Which pain are you really choosing when you hesitate? The world today feeds hesitation like never before. We live in an age of endless comparison. Scroll your phone and you see hundreds of people appearing more successful, more attractive, more certain than you. Doubt multiplies in that environment. You think, "I'm not ready, I don't measure up." But here's the paradox. Those people you admire didn't get there because they were free of doubt. They got there because they acted despite it. That is Stoicism in practice. Not the absence of fear, but the refusal to obey it. Epictetus would call this using reason as a sword, cutting through the illusions of the mind that hold us back. Think about the young professional who keeps rewriting his resume instead of sending it. Or the woman who waits years for the perfect time to start her fitness journey. Or the man who stays in a toxic relationship because he doubts he'll find better. These aren't small acts of caution, they're acts of self-betrayal. The cost of doubt is not just missed opportunities, but the erosion of self-respect. Every time you hesitate when you know you should act, you teach yourself a subtle but powerful lie, that your fear deserves more authority than your reason. And that belief will quietly rot your confidence. What would your life look like if every time hesitation whispered, you chose to act instead? How much of yourself have you already lost to the quiet tyranny of doubt? There's a story I once heard about a firefighter in California. In the middle of a massive wildfire, his team had seconds to decide which route to take. One path looked safer but longer, the other was risky but direct. Some of the crew froze in hesitation, trying to weigh the odds. This firefighter acted. He chose the direct route, guided by instinct and training. That decision saved lives. Later, he said, the cost of waiting would have been fatal. While most of us aren't in life or death situations every day, the principle is the same. Hesitation might not burn you in flames, but it slowly burns away your time, your courage, your potential. The Stoics prepared for such moments. They practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, imagining worst-case scenarios so they would not be paralyzed when real challenges came. The point wasn't to scare themselves, but to free themselves from the illusion that safety could be guaranteed. Doubt thrives on the fantasy of control, the idea that if we wait long enough, we can predict every outcome. But the Stoics knew life is uncertain. The only certainty is your ability to act with virtue now. If tomorrow is not promised, why do we treat hesitation as though time will wait patiently for us? When I reflect on my own life, I see a trail of moments where hesitation nearly robbed me. There was a time I wanted to speak up in a meeting with executives, but my mind flooded with doubt. What if I sound stupid? What if they laugh? I almost stayed silent. But something inside reminded me of Marcus Aurelius's words, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." So I spoke. My idea wasn't perfect, but it sparked a conversation that changed the project's direction. That moment taught me that hesitation doesn't just kill opportunities, it kills the growth that only action can bring. And isn't that the real tragedy? Doubt steals not only the outcomes, but the person you could have become. The stronger, wiser, bolder version of you that only appears on the other side of action never arrives if you hesitate. You remain a smaller version of yourself, rehearsing life instead of living it. Who could you become if hesitation never held you back? What would the you of tomorrow look like if you refused to bow to doubt today? Some people argue that hesitation is necessary, that it's wise to pause. The Stoics would agree if the pause is for reason, not for fear. There's a difference between deliberation and hesitation. Deliberation is active. It's choosing with clarity. Hesitation is passive. It's being held hostage by doubt. Seneca said, "It is not that we think too much, but that we think badly." The problem isn't reflection, it's when reflection turns into paralysis. That paralysis is what keeps men and women trapped in jobs they hate, relationships that kill their spirit, and habits that suffocate their potential. I knew a woman who wanted to leave her corporate career to pursue teaching. For years, she told herself she needed more savings, more preparation, more confidence. Meanwhile, her energy drained, her health declined, and her joy faded. When she finally made the leap, she was already burned out. She told me, "I wish I had left sooner, when I still had more of myself to give." That's the quiet devastation of hesitation. It doesn't just delay your dreams, it damages the person who eventually pursues them. How much of your life is hesitation silently stealing from you right now? If nothing changes, where will you be in 5 years? There's something deeply human about hesitation. It's wired into our survival instinct. Our ancestors paused at the rustling in the grass, unsure if it was prey or predator. That pause once saved lives. But in the modern world, hesitation rarely protects us from tigers. Instead, it prevents us from sending the email, making the call, starting the journey. The environment has changed, but our minds are still trapped in the ancient loop of fear and delay. Stoic philosophy exists in many ways to break that loop. It teaches us to separate fear from reason, instinct from wisdom. Because if you let hesitation rule in a world where speed and courage are rewarded, you're not surviving, you're self-sabotaging. I remember hearing about a college student in Boston who wanted to study abroad. She filled out the forms 3 times but never submitted them. She kept doubting whether she'd fit in, whether she'd afford it, whether she'd miss her friends. Years later, she regretted it, not because life at home was bad, but because she missed the chance to expand her world. I hesitated, she told me, and the window closed. That's the hidden cruelty of hesitation. Windows do close. Opportunities are alive, moving things, and when you freeze, they move on without you. How many doors in your life have quietly closed because you stood still too long, convincing yourself you were being careful? One of the greatest illusions of doubt is the belief that you'll always get another chance, that the same opportunity will circle back when you're ready. But ask anyone who's lived long enough, and they'll tell you the truth. Time doesn't recycle itself. You may find other opportunities, yes, but not the same one. The Stoics hammered this point with brutal honesty. Life is fleeting, they said. You cannot step into the same river twice, because both you and the river are different each time. The job, the love, the dream, they won't wait for you. Doubt convinces you they will, but reality is merciless. I once met a man in Los Angeles who wanted to propose to his girlfriend, but kept doubting if it was the perfect moment. Months turned into years. By the time he finally made up his mind, she had moved on, tired of waiting. He wasn't devastated because she left. He was devastated because he knew his hesitation had been the true culprit. I thought waiting would make me wise, he said. Instead, it made me lose the best part of my life. The Stoics would nod knowingly. Life punishes hesitation more than it ever punishes boldness. If life is constantly moving, isn't hesitation just a polite way of surrendering to loss? Now, doubt isn't always loud. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, disguised as endless preparation. You convince yourself that once you read one more book, attend one more seminar, talk to one more mentor, you'll be ready. But readiness is a mirage. It moves further away the closer you get. The Stoics warned against this very trap. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." In other words, stop preparing to live and just live. Action, not perfection, is the true measure of wisdom. I once coached a young man who wanted to start a podcast. For 2 years, he kept buying better equipment, designing new logos, reading more about the best strategies. But he never released a single episode. His hesitation was polished, professional, dressed up as preparation. The cost? He never built the audience he dreamed of. Meanwhile, others who started with cheap microphones and shaky voices had grown into leaders in his space. Doubt doesn't always shout. It often hides behind excuses that sound reasonable. Are you polishing your doubts and calling them preparation? What dream is waiting for you to stop getting ready and finally begin? Stoicism teaches us to anchor our lives not in endless planning, but in deliberate action guided by virtue. To the Stoics, courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act rightly despite it. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, he wasn't writing for an audience. He was reminding himself daily to overcome hesitation. He urged himself to rise from bed, to speak truth, to do his duty, even when comfort tempted him to delay. His greatness wasn't in thinking lofty thoughts, but in translating them into action again and again. That's the medicine for doubt, repetition of courage. The tragedy of hesitation is that it feels so small in the moment. What's one more day? What's one more week of waiting? But life isn't made of grand decisions alone. It's built from small moments stacked together. Every small hesitation is a brick, and soon you've built a wall around yourself. Years pass, and you wonder why you feel trapped. The truth is, you trapped yourself one hesitation at a time. What walls of hesitation have you been building brick by brick without even realizing it? And what would it take to tear them down? There's a harsh truth the Stoics would insist we face. Hesitation is not neutral. It doesn't leave you where you are, it pulls you backward. Because while you hesitate, the world moves on. Opportunities vanish, relationships shift, and time drains away. To stand still is, in reality, to fall behind. Seneca wrote, "Delay is the greatest waste of life. It snatches what is most precious by postponing." The cost of doubt is not just lost chances, it's life itself, slipping through your fingers while you stand paralyzed. I knew a man who dreamed of writing a novel. For 30 years, he told himself he would start when he retired. When retirement finally came, he sat down to write. But decades of hesitation had rusted his creativity. His mind, once full of ideas, now felt hollow. He told me, "I waited so long that I forgot how to dream." That's the cruelest cost of doubt. It not only robs you of moments, it robs you of the self you might have become if only you had acted sooner. What parts of yourself are being stolen right now while you wait for the perfect moment that will never arrive? The hardest part about hesitation is that it always feels justified in the moment. You tell yourself you're waiting for more clarity, more confidence, more certainty. But life doesn't hand out certainty as a reward for waiting. It gives it as a reward for moving. The Stoics lived in turbulent times, surrounded by wars, plagues, betrayals, and political chaos. If Marcus Aurelius had waited for calm before acting, he would have never acted at all. Instead, he chose to lead, to write, to fight for virtue, even while storms raged around him. His example reminds us that the cost of doubt is not only personal, it ripples outward. When you hesitate, the world around you is deprived of your courage. I once spoke with a woman who had always wanted to start a community project in her neighborhood. She hesitated for years, telling herself she wasn't a leader, that someone else would do it better, but no one else stepped up. The neighborhood declined, young people lost opportunities, and when she finally tried, the spark had already faded. She carried the weight of knowing that her hesitation hadn't just cost her, it had cost others too. That is the unseen burden of doubt. It starves not only your growth, but the lives you might have touched if you had acted sooner. How many lives remain unchanged because you told yourself, "Not yet"? Sometimes hesitation comes disguised as humility. You convince yourself you're being modest by holding back, by not stepping into the spotlight. But Stoicism doesn't praise false modesty. It praises service. If your hesitation keeps you from contributing what you can, then it isn't humility, it's fear. Epictetus taught that each person has a role to play, a duty aligned with nature. To shrink from that duty out of doubt is not modest, it's neglect. When you hesitate to use your gifts, you deny the world the strength you were meant to give. Imagine if every time doubt whispered, Marcus Aurelius had chosen silence instead of writing his meditations. Those words, which have guided millions for centuries, might never have existed. Imagine if Seneca had hesitated to write letters of wisdom to his friend Lucilius, because he doubted whether his words mattered. Our entire understanding of Stoic philosophy might be smaller, weaker, or lost. Every time you hesitate, you risk depriving not just yourself, but generations to come. What if your hesitation today is burying something the world desperately needs tomorrow? There's also a darker side to hesitation: resentment. The longer you delay, the more you start to envy those who act. You look at people who dared, who took risks, and you resent their success, even though you know deep down it was your own hesitation that held you back. That resentment can turn bitter, souring not only your view of others, but of yourself. The Stoics warned against envy because it is wasted energy. They would say, don't waste time wishing you had acted like another person. Spend your energy becoming the person who acts now. I once met a man at a conference who admitted he had an idea for a tech app years before it became popular. He doubted himself, convinced he wasn't smart enough to build it. Someone else did, and today that company is worth billions. He carried a quiet bitterness about it, always comparing himself to the people who had moved faster. But his real enemy wasn't them, it was his hesitation. That's the insidious nature of doubt. It tricks you into thinking you've been robbed, when really, you handed your chance away. How many times have you mistaken hesitation for safety, only to realize later that it was theft in disguise? The Stoics teach us to measure life not by what we think about doing, but by what we actually do. They remind us that action, even imperfect, has more value than endless intention. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." But ambition locked in doubt is worthless. It never breathes, never builds, never becomes real. Ambition requires movement. Without it, you're just a prisoner of potential. I think of a story a friend told me about his father, a man who dreamed of opening a farm. He hesitated year after year, waiting for prices to be better, for the economy to stabilize, for the right time. He never did it. When he passed away, his son found boxes of notes, plans, and sketches for the farm that never existed. His life was full of preparation, but empty of action. And in that emptiness lay the quiet devastation of hesitation. What unfinished plans are gathering dust in your life, waiting for you to stop doubting and finally begin? It's tempting to believe that hesitation is harmless, but every day of delay compounds. Like interest in reverse, it robs you of future possibilities. The Stoics would remind us that the present moment is the only time we ever truly own. Seneca wrote that while we delay, life speeds by. The moment you hesitate, you trade what is real for what is imagined. You give up living now for the fantasy of a safer tomorrow. And tomorrow, when it comes, you often find yourself hesitating again. That cycle becomes a way of life. How many tomorrows have you already wasted promising yourself you'd act one day? The cure for hesitation, according to Stoicism, is not recklessness. It's clarity. To ask, what is within my control and what is not? Doubt thrives when you blur that line. You hesitate because you're trying to control the outcome, the reaction, the future, but those things never belong to you. Your job is action, not outcome. If you focus only on what is yours, the choice to step forward, doubt loses its grip. That's why Epictetus urged his students not to demand that events happen as they wish, but to wish them as they happen. When you accept the limits of control, hesitation has nowhere to live. Imagine what freedom you'd feel if you stopped demanding guarantees before you acted. The truth is, courage grows only in motion. You cannot think your way into bravery. You must act your way into it. Every time you move despite doubt, you weaken its hold. Every time you delay, you strengthen it. Stoicism asks us to practice this daily, in small moments as much as in large ones. Say the truth when it's easier to stay silent. Step outside when it's easier to stay in. Begin the work when it's easier to scroll your phone. These small victories accumulate until courage becomes your habit and hesitation becomes a stranger. Who could you become if courage, not doubt, was the habit you practiced every single day? The weight of silence returned that evening. Daniel sat by the window, the city below him buzzing with its usual chaos. Cars honked, people laughed on the street, music blared from a bar nearby. The world was alive, almost mocking the stillness of his own heart. He held a glass of water in his hand, not wine, not whiskey, just water. He remembered something Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you have assumed these names, good, modest, truthful, rational, a man of equanimity, take care that you do not change these names, and if you should lose them, quickly return to them." Daniel whispered it aloud, tasting each word as though it carried medicine for his broken soul. He thought of the names he wanted to live by now: father, man of courage, man of acceptance. He could not change the past, but he could honor it by living in accordance with the virtues his wife admired, by being the man his son might have grown up to respect. A thought came to him, not comforting, but grounding. Death had stolen from him, yes, but it had not stolen everything. It had not taken his ability to choose, to act, to create meaning from loss. The Stoics always said, "You don't control what happens, only how you respond." That was all he had left, but maybe that was enough. The glass trembled in his hand. For the first time, he set it down carefully instead of slamming it down in frustration. A small act, insignificant to anyone watching, but inside Daniel, it marked the beginning of something else, the reclaiming of himself. You see, life doesn't demand that we stay unbroken. It demands that we keep going, even if we are cracked. The cracks don't have to be shameful. They can be the very place where light enters. And that night, Daniel didn't pray for his wife or child to come back. He didn't bargain with the universe. He only whispered one phrase into the darkness: "I accept." That was the moment the storm inside him began to lose its power, not vanish, never vanish, but weaken, like thunder growing faint as the storm moves out to sea. The world outside might seem like it's constantly pulling at you, emails, notifications, gossip, opinions, demands. But here's the truth the Stoics understood. The world cannot pull you anywhere unless you let it. You are not a leaf carried by the wind. You are the tree whose roots go deep into the earth. Think of Marcus Aurelius. He ruled an empire, carried the weight of millions on his shoulders, and yet he wrote to himself daily reminders like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Imagine the storms he faced, political betrayals, wars, plagues, and still, he reminded himself that his mind was his fortress. That's not just philosophy, that's survival at the highest level. And in your life, you may not be ruling Rome, but you are ruling something. Your career, your household, your relationships, your own future. The more you give away your emotions to what others say or do, the less control you truly have. But when you hold your frame, when you stand steady, no matter what chaos surrounds you, you become magnetic. People sense it, they trust it, they're drawn to it. Here's the paradox. The less you try to control others, the more influence you naturally gain. Why? Because people are not seeking someone who reacts. They are seeking someone who anchors. In every storm, people instinctively look for the one who does not flinch. And when you become that man, the one who is calm in the storm, steady in the chaos, you stop needing to chase anything. Opportunities begin to chase you. Respect begins to chase you. Even attraction begins to chase you. Pause and ask yourself, how many of the conflicts in your life came not from what happened, but from how you reacted? How many regrets were born in a moment when you lost control of your emotions? And how much stronger would you stand today if, in those moments, you had chosen silence over shouting, calm over panic, clarity over confusion? Every day, life gives you small storms to practice with. A rude comment, a delay in traffic, a rejection, a misunderstanding. They're not annoyances, they're training grounds. They're weights in the gym of your mind. Each time you choose not to be shaken, you grow stronger. Each time you let go of what you cannot control, you reclaim more of yourself. And here's the most powerful part. Others can feel it. They may not say it out loud, but they sense it in their bones. They recognize when they are in the presence of a man who does not need approval, who does not beg for validation, who does not bend with every passing mood of the world. That presence is rare, and rarity creates value. Now let me take you deeper. Imagine a world where almost every man reacts, complains, and blames. In that world, the one who chooses restraint, composure, and inner strength immediately stands out. He becomes the exception. He becomes unforgettable. And that is the Stoic way, not to be untouched by life, but to be unshaken by it. The silence in the room grew louder with every tick of the clock. Daniel sat there staring at the city below, the faint hum of traffic rising like static against his thoughts. His wife's words still echoed in his head. "You don't hear me. You never listen." It wasn't the first time she had said it, and yet, each time it landed like a fresh wound. The truth was, he had always believed that speaking was strength. that to be a man was to have the right words at the right moment, to argue his case, to win with wit or logic. But here he was, broken not because of what he failed to say, but because of what he failed to hear. In that moment of reflection, Marcus Aurelius's words surfaced in his memory. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Suddenly, Daniel realized that listening wasn't about being silent while waiting for your turn to speak. It was about stepping out of your own fortress of certainty and walking into another person's world. That evening, when his wife returned home, he didn't start with an explanation. He didn't defend. He didn't justify. He simply sat across from her and said, "I want to understand you." And then he stopped. No words followed. At first, she didn't believe him. Her voice carried the weight of years, frustration, disappointment, exhaustion. She tested him like someone who had been let down too many times. But for the first time, Daniel didn't interrupt. He didn't correct her version of the past. He just listened. And in that listening, something shifted. Not just between them, but within him. Because listening wasn't weakness. It was discipline. It was power restrained. It was the Stoic practice of holding back the impulse to react, to control, to dominate, and instead allowing the moment to be. You see, we live in a world where everyone wants to be heard, but few are willing to hear. And that's why listening is so rare, so magnetic. When you listen, you don't just hear words. You catch the tremor in someone's voice, the silence between sentences, the story behind the story. And that makes people feel seen, respected, and valued. Something louder than any speech could ever accomplish. What Daniel discovered is what the Stoics knew all along. Listening is a form of love. Not sentimental love, not weak attachment, but love as recognition. The courage to acknowledge another soul's existence fully. And maybe, just maybe, that is why the men who master silence are remembered longer than the ones who master speech. He looked around the room, the same room that once felt like a prison. The buzzing lights, the chatter, the phones, the deadlines. But this time, it wasn't chaos. It was just noise. Noise that couldn't touch him anymore. He had stepped outside of it. That's when he realized. Peace isn't found when life becomes quiet. Peace is found when you become quiet inside, no matter how loud life gets. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He finally understood. Strength wasn't about control over others. It wasn't about winning arguments, climbing ladders, or proving anyone wrong. It was about control over himself, his breath, his focus, his choices. He thought back to the moment when he wanted to lash out, when the room was spinning, when his heart felt like it was tearing through his chest. If he had exploded, he would have lost more than his composure. He would have lost himself. But by stepping back, by not reacting, by mastering his silence, he found a power so much greater. And here's the truth that many men never learn. When you stop chasing recognition, you become recognized. When you stop demanding respect, you become respected. When you stop seeking control, you become unshakable. It isn't weakness to stay calm when others rage. It isn't passivity to walk away when others beg for war. It is strength beyond what most men can imagine. That day, he left the office later than usual. The city was alive, glowing, rushing. He walked through it slowly, not needing to keep up with anyone else's pace. For the first time in years, he wasn't running. He wasn't performing. He wasn't pretending. He was simply there. The world will keep testing you. People will insult you. Life will throw storms at you. Chaos will whisper in your ear. But remember, it isn't what they do to you that defines you. It's how you respond or don't respond. A fire only grows when you feed it. Leave it alone, and it dies out. So when someone tries to pull you into their storm, do not fight the wind. Stand firm like the mountain. The storm will pass. And when it does, you will still be standing, calm, steady, unshaken, because true strength is silence that cannot be broken. In the end, Alex sat once more on the old wooden bench overlooking the river. The city still roared behind him, the same endless noise of ambition and hurry, but it no longer pierced him. He watched the water flow, silent, steady, unbothered by the rocks it collided with. The river carried everything, fallen branches, stray leaves, even the reflections of the sky, and yet it never clung to any of it. It received and it let go. Life, he realized, is no different. We too are rivers. People come, fortunes rise, tragedies strike, joy passes, and grief lingers. But all are currents meant to move through us, not define us. The Stoics had been whispering this truth across centuries. We own nothing except the way we meet the moment. Alex did not find triumph or happiness in the loud sense the world chases. What he found was quieter, deeper, a freedom that came not from changing life, but from changing his stance toward it. He no longer gripped the world with desperate hands. He held it lightly, like water slipping through open fingers, and in that lightness, he was no longer afraid, not of loss, not of rejection, not of the uncertainty of tomorrow, because like the river he knew, whatever comes, he could carry it. The lesson was not an ending, but a way of walking, a way of breathing, a way of living unshaken, as the Stoics had lived. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alex understood. The true strength of a man is not found in conquering the world, but in mastering the current within himself.